All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to day 27 of the AWD1115 Database-Driven Web Development 2 class. Today, we're going to finish up the Chapter 8 TripLog app, and we're going to go into Chapter 9. Now, a couple things as we get started. The first thing is, we kind of did it like this last week, and then we had a test. Right now, that's what I'm looking at tomorrow, is to give you a test. Now, with that said, the test will be probably very light on chapter 9 because we're just going over it today. Plus, I've got to write the test tonight, so I can't tell you exactly what's in it. All right. But that's what I'm looking at, and then giving you again Thursday and Friday to work on it. We'll make it due, you know, on Sunday or whatever. All right. So your chapter 7 stuff was due last Sunday. Your chapters 6 through 7 test is due tonight, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to work on that. All right. And like I said, and then your chapters 8 and 9, the written test, the labs, and the homework, they're not going to be due this Sunday. I'm going to make them push it off and make it the following Sunday, which is, I think, the 15th. And you'll get an email on that today. All right. Now, part of my problem, and yeah, I have plenty of problems, but part of my problem is, when all this stuff went to online, sometimes what seems to happen, rush to get through something, and we either get through it a little earlier than I thought, and I just tell you guys to leave, or we don't get through enough of it, or we get through some or most of it, but it's error prone. And let me show you what I mean. So, for you, Grant, if you have your trip log, please bring that up right now if it's not up already, because like I said, we are going to go through it. But I'm going to start going through it by giving you this, and that is what I had originally in mind. Now, this is me. So if you didn't do this, in all seriousness, good for you. If you didn't do this, let me close it. I got a bunch of stuff open here. So let me just close a bunch of the stuff that I have open. It's going to close everything. We'll bring it back up. Okay. One of the things that happened yesterday was in our models when I went into the trip log context. And again, you may have done this, you may not have. I don't know. I can't see anybody else's machine. But what I did yesterday was I forgot to put the word options in there, in what you see in blue, because options are what get passed to the constructor of not trip log context, but trip log context parent, or DB context. What that meant, all right, not putting that in there, was everything worked fine until I went in and ran the program. Then when I ran the program, I got this error. No database provider has been configured for this DB context. So I took a boatload of time and I went back over my app settings.json file. I went back over the program.cs file. I went and looked at everything except where the problem actually was. And it's what I just showed you. All right. And I'm not going to lie to you either. Most of the descriptions, and when people say what causes this, had absolutely nothing to do with what the actual problem with this was, which is, like I said, putting the word options in here. So if in your trip log context file, if you don't have the word options in there, please put it in there. All right. There's a couple of other things we're going to change too. We're going to make a very small change to your trip view model file, and we're going to make some changes to the trip.cs file. So for that reason, what I'd like you to do, and you may be able to do it directly, you may not, but go and see if you can remove that trip log database right now. All right. If you can, great. If you can't, we'll just get rid of it a little bit later. All right, but see if you can remove that. So like I said, go back into your trip log context file and be sure you pass options as a constructor in your trip log context constructor. All right, so that was the first thing. Then next, staying in the same place in the trip view model. All right, I went back and where I did this last year, and I even put a note here that said, just basically live with the warning, because I had a question mark in here. Take the question mark out. All right, there are going to be a couple places that you're going to see in a couple of minutes where we'll have to add question marks, but this is not one of them. This is the exact same file that we did yesterday, the trip view model file, except yesterday, trip, I had a question mark there. And I have, believe me, I spent a lot of time playing with this stuff, setting the question mark, not setting the question mark, setting something like this equal to null or to whatever. And this appeared to work the best. So please, again, if you had a question mark there, remove it. So it should look like this. So that's the second thing. All right. Then next, with our trip.cs file, I made quite a few changes in here. Again, I looked at it. I did a bunch of different things to it, with it, whatever you want to say. And I tried doing things in different ways. All right. But this is what I came up with. And I think this is the best way. Now, your trip ID, no changes. Your destination, no changes. Start date and end date, no changes. Now, what this means is later when we run the program, you must enter a destination, you must enter a start date, you must enter an end date. All right. And since start date and end date are actually date times, they must be valid. Now, what I didn't try, because I just didn't really feel the need. Well, I don't think we're doing any range checks. So for instance, I could have said when my trip is, I could have put in a date that passed already, or I could put an end date that's earlier than the start date. All right. That's just extra things that we would have to put in extra checks. But I believe at least as of right now, with these first 17 lines or so, there's nothing that has to be changed. All right. But as we move on, there are some changes. Okay. I added question marks into everything for the accommodations and everything for the thing to do, 1, 2, and 3. And I initialized them to null. Now, technically, when you put the question mark in there, what that says is nulls, don't break the program if something isn't put in there. But again, I played with this. This is what I did most of this morning. My morning class is taking a test, so I spent a good 2 hours playing around with this and doing all sorts of different things with it, trying to see if I could make something work, not work, etc. All right. I did have for the date, time, start date, and the end date, I did have question marks in here. All right. Even though we have those, okay, you're still supposed to put them in because they're required. All right. Now with the accommodation, remember the accommodation is what's on our page 2. All right, we've got 3 pages. Page 1, I'm going to bring this back up, yes, once again. But page 1 here is this. And remember, on here, you are expected to put in a destination, a start date, and an end date. But those are the only 3 fields on there that are required. It's expected that if you put an accommodation here and you click next, that you'll put in a phone number and you'll put in an email address. That said, that's not required. All right. But it's more or less expected. As far as the third page with the things to do, that's never required. All right. And, things to do, I just called them thing to do one, thing to do two, and thing to do three. If you do put something in there, you can put in one thing, two things, or three things. It doesn't matter. All right. Now, we're following the instructions that are in the book here. Okay. Technically, if you come in here and you put in a destination and you put in a start date and end date and you leave the accommodation empty, really, we could have had a button here that said save because that's enough that you could have saved. Also, technically, we could have had a save button here. But this assumes that you're going to run through the gamut of pages because, again, it's possible that you have a destination, but you have not booked anything yet, but you know a start date and an end date. And you know what you want to do. All right. For instance, and this doesn't mean anything to any of you, but I'll just tell you quickly. There is a place in Wisconsin that's called Door County, and it's up more or less in northern Wisconsin. But one of the things that it's known for is how beautiful it is when seasons change and the leaves start changing colors. So I could put here, for example, Door County, and if I knew, let's say this weekend was the greatest time to go, I could say, well, I know I'm going to start and I'm going to give it Friday's date, which I think is the 6th, and I'm going to go until Sunday, which is the 8th. All right. And then I could have a bunch of stuff I wanted to do here. But again, if I did not book anything yet, that could be empty, meaning these could be empty. So the only thing I'm bringing up here is there are a bunch of different combinations, permutations, etc., that we can have for this. All right. And the only thing that we're required to put in is this and these. All right. So with that said, then, like I said, I put question marks in front of each one of these, just like this. All right. And I set everything to null. All right. And I'm going to save this once more. Now, if you were able to remove that database, if you were able to, then it's really time to do a migration. Now, I don't even know if we did a migration yesterday or not. I don't remember. All right. I was playing around with it before, so I was doing some migrations, then removing them, etc. So I don't have anything in here. So I am going to go into my tools, NuGet Package Manager in the Package Manager console. And as I typically do, I'm going to do my add migration. All right. And then I'm going to put in their initial setup. This is where I found that error that I mentioned to you at the beginning of class, because that error that I showed you, that's what came up when I did this. All right. So let's see if it works. Okay. And what you'll notice, it looks like it's fine. And when we go in here, yes, it has the setup for everything, but typically where you'd put in your records, it's empty because again, this is empty. All right. So now I'm going to go in and do my update database. All right. And when I did this before, like I mentioned, when I didn't have that options, parentheses, passing it to the constructor of the parent, I wasn't even getting a migration. I was getting the same error I showed you before. All right. Okay. So if I come back here now and I refresh and I open this up and I look in my databases, lo and behold, there's trip log. And if I do look in there, there's just the one table, there should be, and it's empty. There it is, trips. And if I open it up, again, there's nothing in it. All right. Now, hopefully, like I said, all of that made at least some sense to you. All right. Now, I'm trying to be complete here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our controllers. All right. Now, I know there's some problems with the trip controller. I believe that the home controller is just fine. All right. As far as I know, it's just fine the way that it is. All right. So that's what we're going to look at next. And the home controller is it's very small anyway, if you remember. So I'm going to go to controllers and I'm going to open up the home controller. All right. One thing I still had, I believe in mind, was I think I still had the using statement in there. All right. Oh, yeah, I still had the using statement in there for working with privacy and the logger and stuff. I removed that. All right. Okay. So we've got public class, home controller, inherits from controller, private trip log context. I left the question mark in there, context with a get set. And then we have our typical constructor right here. All right. So we created our context variable and then we set it based on, passing that in. And then the only other thing that we had in here was this action result. Okay. So again, what is that doing right there? Okay. It's saying go through trips, order it and show it to me by start date. Since we set an order by, it should show the earliest trip first. All right. And then list the stuff out. And finally, just return view trips. Like I said, I could be wrong there, but I think that's pretty much what we had yesterday. All right. So again, I'm going to save and I'm going to close that. And now I'm going to open up the trip controller. This one has quite a few changes. So what you'll want to do is just kind of watch as we're going through this. All right. Most of them are a little lower. I think most of the stuff you see here is okay. Let me move that. Let me move this over. There you go. All right. So again, I believe originally I still had the logging or privacy stuff in there. So we remove that using trip log controller, trip controller, controller, nothing new there. Okay. We're adding our private context variable, nothing new there. We're putting in our constructor. I believe I showed you yesterday 2 different ways of doing this. So again, this, I'm not going to change it, but I could remove that, hit enter and put this within curly braces, or I can do it the way that it's done. You're going to see both actually in action. Now, I'm not asking you this, Grant, but I'm just saying, I know that when you guys took the class with Evan last summer, all right, when you were writing functions that were working with Node, for example, the same kind of thing happens where you can write this and basically do it lambda-like, or you can write it more the old-fashioned way. I do it both ways. And I just changed it on this one just to show you again that you can do it both ways. All right. Then I believe this is exactly what we had yesterday as well. The redirect to action, index home. So now the changes are going to start in here. Okay. All right. So in our get, okay, like I said, it'll be in here. If you say, oh no, these look the same, just hold on. All right. So public view result add string ID, which we're defaulting to the empty string. All right. We're creating a new trip view model. And we started here, we did this yesterday, but again, we probably started a little bit too late in the class period. All right. So we're checking first to see if we're on page 2. If we are on page 2, if you remember, page 2 had the information in it, all right, where we can put both the email address and the phone number for where we're staying. That's what page 2 is. All right. Now, there are a couple places here that you are going to have to basically, when you refer to accommodation, most of the time, you're going to put a question mark in there. And that's because, again, going back to what we looked at earlier, we had that question mark in there and we initialized it to null. So again, if string dot is null or empty accommodation, So if we haven't filled out anything yet, we can just basically go on to the next page, right? And when you look at this, again, notice it's a peak, which says we don't really have, there's nothing to write right now. All right. So we don't have to worry about technically doing anything right now and getting rid of what's in destination. No, we're moving to page 3. We still need that stuff. All right. But we know now since we're moving to page 3, all right, we know that page 2 is empty, so we can create our destination. This is not our accommodations. This is our destination. All right. And we return a view, and something I showed you right before the end of class yesterday, and I'm not even going to say foolish me, stupid me. One of the things we did at the end of class yesterday was we went in and we created that trip view, and in here I had page 1, page 2, and page 3, but we called them add 1, add 2, and add 3. So you're going to have to change. I've already just right mouse clicked on them and did a rename. The good news is we have no code in there, so it shouldn't hurt anything. There shouldn't be any problem at all doing that. All right. If we hit this else that you see right here, that meant that there is something in the accommodations. All right. So in other words, we have a viable page 2. All right. Now, since neither of those things in there are mandatory, it's possible we put in an email address without a phone number, or we put in a phone number without an email address. But either way, all right, now we have to basically come in here and grab the accommodation stuff. All right. And you'll notice we're using a keep in there, whereas before in here we used a peak. All right. And again, remember the difference between the two. All right. That when you use keep, in fact, I'm going to go back to the book. I want to give you the right definition. I don't want to put it into my own words. So let me back up a few pages here. Not enough pages, evidently. There it is. All right. So when we're doing this keep, we are passing something to it. So as it says, it marks the value as unread. All right. Whereas peak, as it says, reads the value with a key, but again, does not mark it as read. So the idea is, all right, when you're working with peak, it's more or less, it's more inclusive. When you're working with keep, it's just one thing that you're working with. All right, again, giving you my interpretation of this, which may or may not be the best way to tell it to you. All right, so again, otherwise, as it says, we're in page 2. So we did have something to basically send there, and we're returning our page 2. But if we're not in page 2, we have to either be on page 3 or page 1. So the next else checks to see if we're on page 3. All right. So if we're on page 3, this is where that save is. The button to save. All right. So again, notice we're setting the page number to 3. Okay. and we are creating a brand new trip in here. Okay, we haven't done anything with it yet. All right. Now, if we're not on page, excuse me, if we're not on page 2 and we're not on page 3, we have to be on page 1. All right. So that's this. All right. And again, that's going to basically mean that we're, like I said, we're on page 1, which means either we're only going to be doing, we filled out the stuff we need to fill out on page 1. We haven't moved yet, or we just got to page 1, whatever. All right. Then we've got this add, and here's where there were some mistakes, especially a little lower on the post. All right. So please take a good look at your code. All right. So the first thing that's in here, and I think these were all correct, but I could be wrong. All right. As it says, this is checking to see if the model state is valid. All right. And if it is valid, notice what we're basically, all right, what we're moving into temp data. All of the destination information, all of the accommodation information. And when I say all of that, that's the actual destination, the accommodation information, the start date, and the end date. All right. Now, notice if we do that, we're doing an add. All right. So we're redirecting to add, but add with page 2. So in other words, we're kind of calling back to the same routine, but we're telling it now it's page 2 that we want to work with. All right. So again, if the model state wasn't valid, we're just going to return you to where you were. Okay. If you were on page 2, again, this probably was mostly correct. It's the one with page 3 that was the worst. All right. So this has got our accommodation information in it. And so what do we care about? Well, remember, there's 2 fields on that page, accommodation phone and accommodation email. So if we're on page 2, we want to be able to copy that information into temp data and redirect, but now redirect to page 3. Here's where there were boatloads of errors. All right. And I'm going to move this over so you can see everything. All right. I had a bunch of stuff here that was wrong. It was in my angst to get it done on time yesterday. That's no excuse. That was just stupid. All right. But please take a good look at that. And you'll notice, again, 2 things. First, yes, there are some things in here with green squigglies, meaning that there are warnings. But when we are working with accommodation, every time, if it's our accommodation object or it's any of the properties, we're putting in a question mark for those because, again, none of them are mandatory. All right. And if you don't do that, when you come in here and you try to do your save changes, you're going to get an error. I'm speaking from personal experience. All right. And the error basically says, it came up first and it said, phone cannot be null. And I looked at it, I'm like, well, why can't that be null? That's when I went back and changed it to the question mark back in the model file, and I set it equal to null. I just did that just to see if that's what it was. Yes, I did. I went back and I did a remove migration, made that change, put it back in again, ran the program, and then it gave me the same error, but with the email file. So it was getting past the phone and going all the way to the email file. So I knew then that was the problem. All right. And basically with all this stuff we're doing in temp data, we're eventually going to be writing all that stuff out, or I should say to the database. And really with temp data, all we're keeping is our destination. So for instance, if I run this and I say I want to go to Nashville, it should say trip to Nashville added, and then return me right back again. And again, that is temp data. All right. If it wasn't page 1 and it wasn't page 2, and it wasn't page 3. Somehow I shouldn't be there anyway. So I just go back to the home page. That's it. And I believe this is what we had yesterday for our cancel. So that doesn't change anything. That's fine the way that it is. All right. Now I hope through my own screw ups that I did a good enough job where if I screwed something up, I explained to you what it is, what it was, and what it should be. All right. So with that said, now I'm going to do one more file save all. And I'm going to close this. All right. And
Mr.
now,
Scott,
go ahead.
real quick, just to make sure that I understand this. So these redirect to actions every time we, I guess, click the add button, that's sending us to the next page and it's storing our inputs into temp data, right?
Basically, yes. Yes, that is
And
right.
then when we click add on the last page, it brings us back to the
When
home.
when we
and
click save on the
or
last
save.
page. Yes.
Save, yes. And then it
That's actually
basically
writing it
removes
out to the
that.
database.
It's putting it to the database, removing that from the temp data, and it putting it actually into the database.
Yes.
Okay.
Technically, since it's writing it out there, we don't have to remove it.
Okay.
All right.
Because it's
It's
marked
just
as red.
right, and it's giving us that message because we told it to write that out.
Okay. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. No, not a problem. Oh, I appreciate the questions. All right. So I believe our controllers are okay. I believe our migration should be fine. I believe our models are okay. So let's start working with the views. And as we usually do, let's start with the layout CSHTML. All right. So taking that one from the top, all right, want to do before this is we're going to write a little code in here. All right. And if we take a look right here, if we take a look, okay, mentioned this yesterday, this is this right here. That's what it is. But if we want to say trip to Nashville added, we should be writing that right below. This is what's in our temp data. That's the message. All right. So the reason I'm saying that is when we come in here at the top, we're going to put in some razor code right here. Not that at all. Yes, I better say data, not date. Okay, so temp data, message, question mark, dot, to string, to string. All right, so string message, temp data. All right. Now, again, as always, if I highlight this, converting non-literal or possible null value to a non-nullable type. I am, this is the best that I could do. All right. And I mean, sometimes I've looked at some of the code that's in here, not our book's code, but I've gone out and it's amazing when people basically want to have no warnings in their code, the number of question marks that you're going to find out there. All right. So this is basically setting up the message. And then all right, this will allow us a little later to write it out. All right. But again, we will put an if statement in there later because we only want to write that out if there's a message. Technically, it wouldn't hurt. We could do it anyway. But if there's nothing in there, that's kind of foolish to sit there and tell it to write something. All right, so we've got our doc type, our HTML tag, our head tag. our char set, our viewport, those are all fine. Our title, we can use view data title in here, or again, if we to write it like this. Okay, I'll just leave it like that. Technically, it doesn't matter. We've got our Bootstrap min CSS. We've got our site CSS, and it even allowed us to have a trip log styles.css. There's nothing in those. Technically, I could even leave them out. I shouldn't say that. This is the system one that it created, but this is mine, and there's nothing in there. So I can leave that out. I don't really care. So I'm just going to leave it on there. All right. Then we go down into our body. And you've seen me do this before, so I'm going to do it again. And that is in my header here, I'm just going to remove everything and write stuff myself. All right. So the first thing I like to do, and I am going to do here, is I'm going to take where I've got this div class equal container here, I'm going to put everything in a container. All right. So in other words, hopefully that doesn't confuse you, but really what I'm saying here is, all right, that div ends down here, which is fine. All right, but I don't want it to start here. I want it to start there. All right, so everything is inside of that container div. You may or may not remember this, but one of the things about working with Bootstrap 5 is you are not supposed to nest containers. You shouldn't have a container within a container. That's why I pulled it out and moved it. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of work in here in the header. This is just, for lack of better words, all we're doing in there is aesthetic work. But with that said, all right, I want to mention everything that's in here because, in my opinion, what I've done on occasion is I've glossed over some of the bootstrap, which you may remember or you may not remember. I don't mean just you, Grant. I mean everybody in the class. So what we're saying here is anything within these header tags, we want it to have that secondary background, which is kind of that grayish type of background. All right. We want the text to automatically be centered. We want the text color to be white. We want padding 3 all the way around. That's not 3 pixels. That's 3 units. When you put in margin or you put in padding, all right, just so you know, and I could go out to the Get Bootstrap page and show you this, but here, I'm just going to put it in here. We can put in, for example, M0. All right. We can put in here M1, and I'm not going to keep going, but it goes all the way to M5. Now, unlike when we do this with heading tags, here, the bigger the number, the more margin you get. All right. Not only can you do these, but there is, as you can see here, there is MB for margin bottom. There is MT for margin top. There is no real, I don't believe at least, there's an ML and an MR for margin left and margin right. Rather, for margin left, it's MS for margin start, and it's ME for margin end. And the start is left margin, and the end is right margin. Now, I'm not showing you this, but we could replace all those M's in there with P's. And you can, because the padding works exactly the same, just like it does back in the days of AWD1000 when we were talking about the box model and margin versus padding. All right. So that says padding 3 and then margin bottom of 2. So again, more than anything else, it's just a little bit of aesthetics in there. All right. Now, we do want to go in and render the body. All right. But we now is where we come in before we render the body. We're going to do some checks in here, and we're going to see if there is a temporary message for us to show. All right. So I could put a comment in there even, but I just explained it to you. So hopefully it made sense. Remember, since we're in a .cshtml file, all right, which is a razor file, right? It's a CS, okay, C# HTML hypertext markup language file. So we need to start it because we're putting some C# in here with an @ sign. So in other words, what this is saying right here is, all right, okay, so we'll come in here and again, we'll use an H2. We'll say class equals, this will be a BG light. And again, this could be changed any way you'd like it changed. Center, P2, margin bottom 1. All right. And here's where we'll put in the message. And again, we're inside of a Razor code block. If we want that actual message to show in here, all right, this is how we're doing it. All right. Now, when you look up on top here, we've also got this possible subheader. So we're going to put one more @if in here, which will display a subheader if the view has provided text for it. All right. You'll see this hopefully later when we run the program. All right. So I'm going to have another one of these. Okay. And I'm just going to copy the one I have here because it's very similar. All right. But this won't be message. This will be subheader. And we can format it the same way here. All right. Or, I'll just leave this out. Let's just give it some margin bottom and some margin top. And this will be at subheader. All right. And again, you'll see this a little bit later. Then we render our body. We end main. We end div. All right. So again, this is our layout file. So we're telling that we also want it to have a footer that's going to be very, very simplistic. It's going to say 2020, well, an copyright sign, 2023 trip log. All right. And again, if we want to, yeah, it's a container, but we can come in here if we want to and say text. But we can say text center, make it look a little nicer. But what is important is that we come over here. We're not doing any of this stuff now with this privacy. That's all gone. Now, if you wanted to leave that in there, of course you could. All right. And if you actually worked for a company that had something for privacy, you could. All right. We're not doing anything with JavaScript, so technically this can all be removed. It shouldn't hurt a bit to leave it there. All right. But we're not doing anything with it. I'll leave it there. Okay. And let's see. Oh yeah, here was our bottom div. Okay. So that should be everything that's in there. So let me do a file save all on here. All right. So we now have our layout done. So the next thing to do then would be our index.cshtml. All right, for home. And then the ones that we just changed the name of to add 1, add 2, and add 3, we'll do those. So I'm going to close this. And under home, I'm going to bring up my index.cshtml, which, as you know, is the page that, if I run the program right now, this is what's going to show. And this is a bunch of garbage. So I'm going to start by getting rid of it, and we're going to start keying some stuff in. 50 or 60 lines here. So we'll put this in, talk about it a little bit, and by then it should be around 1 o'clock. So we'll take our first break. We'll come back. We'll do add 1, add 2, and add 3.cshtml. We'll run it, and hopefully things will be working then. If they're not, then we'll try to debug them. If they are working, then we'll go right into chapter 9. All right, so let's come in here. This, and we saw this in the chapter, this will be an at model I enumerable. And again, that actually should make sense to everybody. All right, and the reason that it is an at model I enumerable, the reason that you have that is we don't know what we're printing out. Remember, when we're doing this, okay, we have 3 different pages we have to account for. All right, so let's come in and give this a title. And again, I'm just going to use viewbag.title. I don't know about you. I tend to just use viewbag. I'm not going to say all the time. All right, but other than this chapter, I sure use it most of the time. All right. Now, what we're supposed to put in here, I believe, I'm going to double check this, but I believe at the top, where is it? There is this, add trip. So this is what we're doing right now. This is what we're doing in here. And remember, at a minimum, these 3 out, right? We can also, if we want to, we can have accommodations with no things to do, or no accommodations with things to do, or accommodation and things to do. All right, so we've got those possibilities. This stuff that's in here, these are going to be our add1.cshtml, our add2.cshtml, and our add3.cshtml. So that's what we're working on in here right now. All right. Okay. And again, you know this already, but just to repeat it, that is, it's totally legit to put all this that I just put there. We could have probably fit that all in one line. All right. I like to have stuff be able to debug it faster. That's the reason I do it the way I do it. All right. And then we're going to have a table. Nothing new there. As always, we'll need our head. And again, if you go back and take a look, all right, at what we're going to be putting in here. All right. So if we go back to here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. We don't have any links or buttons over here like we've had before. Remember, this is not a CRUD application. All right. And what I mean by that is, yes, you can add, so you can create and you can read. But once you put it in there, technically the way that it's written, you can't edit or update and you can't delete. All right, just the way that it's currently set up. I'm not saying that that capability couldn't be added, but that's not what we were asked to do here. All right, so we've got 5 different fields here. So in our table row, in our headings, we'll have 5 different headings. Destination, start date, end date, accommodations, and things to do. Okay, so that's our head section for our table. And as you know, all right, not only are we going to need to put a header in there, but we're going to need a body in there as well. All right, so let's put that in next. Hopefully, at least, hopefully, by saying this, this is self-explanatory by now. But I've already shown you that those fields there are these fields. That's what we just put in was this. All right, we put in those headings. So like I said, that shouldn't be really any surprise to anybody. All right, so now we have to go in here and start filling up the body. So we're going to start with a for each statement. And inside of here, we're going to end up with several add if statements. All right, so now remember that these fields, the destination, the start date, and the end date, those were our three required fields. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to see whether or not the next thing is, were our accommodations empty? All right, so that's the next thing we're going to check in here. All right. So that'll be surrounded in the TD tag. So basically, again, we're putting code in our TD tag, and it'll be an if statement. Actually, it'll be a couple of if statements. All right. Why? Because remember, as I told you before, it's possible. We've got four possibilities. Possibility one, we have nothing in the email, we have nothing in the phone. Possibility two, we have an email but no phone. Possibility three, we have no email but a phone. And possibility four, we have both an email and a phone. So that's what we're checking for in here now. Now, by doing it like this and writing it in the way you see it right here, all right, this is only going to go through if either we have something in one of the fields, in the other field, or in both. There's nothing to do if this is empty. All right, so we're only handling it in here if indeed there is something to handle. All right. Okay. And boy, oh boy, Jeff. All right, so we put that into a div. All right, and I'm going to put another add if statement in here. Actually, there'll be two of them when we get done. And I'm going to leave that exactly where it is, but I am going to copy it because the thing for the email is, again, virtually the same. So this will change to email, as will this, and as will this. All right. This is going to allow us to give whatever information we have put in there. All right. Whatever information we have put in there is now going to be there for us to take a look at, for lack of better words. All right. Now we've got to do a similar type of thing, but with our things to do. Because again, we could have one thing to do, or two things to do, or three things to do, or any combination thereof. All right. Not only that, we're not told what if the person is filling this out? So what if you were filling this thing here out? All right. And under the things to do, all right, what if you change your mind and you don't want to go to a show? You just decide you don't want to. So you remove that. Technically, you don't have to come back in here and ride the subway up to the number one. You can put something in here and or something in here and or something in here. So we've got to be cognizant of that and again, allow our program to grab it, for any of those, for lack of better words. All right. So this is going to be our last TD. All right. And it's going to, again, we'll have another @if in here. I'll put the first one in, then I'm going to copy it twice. All right. So again, we want to do this 3 times. So I'm going to just grab this, put it in there 3 times, change this one to 2, and this to 2, and then this one to 3, and this to 3. All right. That should end our data, which ends our row, which ends our table. All right. Body, which ends our table. So that should right now be everything. So we have now, what is left is to add the code for the add 1, the add 2, and the add 3. And like I said, we'll do that in just a moment. Now, all I want to do here is I want to run it, not with the idea that it's going to work because it's incomplete. All right, but I should be able to take a look at aesthetically how this has been set up. And there it is. Okay. If I do go into add a trip, all right, it's not doing anything because we don't have that stuff in there yet. All right. But you can see it doesn't look terrible. It doesn't look great. All right. We've got the trip log in here. All right. And we have right there, as you can see, we've got our footer. All right. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to write add 1, which is about 35 lines, add 2, which is about 25 lines, and add 3, which is about 25 lines. I've got just about 105. So let's please come back at 120. I'm going to get myself a new drink. So I'll see you at 120. All right, it's 1:15, so I'm going to continue on. You already heard this, but clicking this does nothing right now because we don't have a page one for it to go to. That should make sense. Now, one thing that we didn't really talk about, all right, but I want to mention it to you right now, and that is if I go back in here and we go back and we look at what we had just talked about in here, as far as, where are we? As far as what's going to be in there, we talked about that subheader, all right? And when you look here, the subheader is one of three things. If we're on page one, the subheader is add trip destination and dates. If we're on page two, the subheader is add info for the Ritz or whatever, whatever the accommodation is we chose. And this will be add things to do in whatever destination we chose. So that's what we're filling in right now. That'll be the subheader thing, all right, that we'll want to print out if indeed there again is a value in there. All right, so let's do that right now. So again, I'm going to close this and I'm going to go to add one, which is currently empty. Good. All three of these will be an at model. No, whoops, try that again. At model, and they'll be of type trip view model. We'll put in the title and we'll put in the subheader. Now, again, this may, because I put in those question marks, this may have to be tweaked. I don't know. We'll see in just a minute. And when I say it'll have to be tweaked, right now, the way this is set up, and we've gone through this kind of thing before, but we've got a div in there where we're doing a validation summary on everything. All right, but since we put those question marks in there, it does come up, if it does indeed come up that that we are getting the messages when we don't put in anything in the fields that aren't mandatory, then we'd have to pull this out, put a span in there, and do the validation summary on the individual fields. All right. This over a little. All right. So that is that's our hidden field. And I'm going to copy this because we're going to have, again, a bunch of these. All right. So I'll just do them one at a time. So first is our destination. All right. Then this will be accommodation, as will this, as will this. All right. Next, we'll have our start date followed by our end date. All right. That's done. Since this is just a label, we can put it in as 2 words. And then our end date, so that's almost the same as this one. And then finally at the bottom, we need our buttons. And that is add 1, or our first page. Okay. So again, if I've gotten too far ahead of you, let me know. And if you're finished, let me know that too, please.
I am ready to go. Thank you.
Great. I'll be able to steal a little bit of this stuff in here. I'm just going to grab that much. All right. And have to also make a couple changes, but I'll do that momentarily. So as you'd guess, this will be add trip page 2. And this will change to add info, and we have to add for the accommodations. So let's do a little bit of template literals in here. Oh, I look in here, I spelled destination wrong. All right, and this will be add trip for, and we'll change this. Like that. All right, again, we can have that validation summary. I'm looking in here, I didn't even put that in. All right, so I don't think we need that in here. So I'll leave that out. All right, again, the action will be add. I don't have an ending form tag, which is why I'm getting an error right now. All right, so action is add, hidden page number again, and we're going to again do a bunch of these. But these will be our accommodations. All right, so I'll need 2 of these, and these will be trip.accommodation phone and trip.accommodation email. Okay. All right, and again, I can copy these buttons over from what I had earlier. Okay. Is there again the same thing, the next and the cancel, which will leave us with just our last one. So again, if you can let me know when you're done, please.
I'm ready to go.
Right, great. So again, I'm just going to copy all this and then make the changes I need to make. All right, so this will be for page 3 or add 3. All right, so again, starting at the top. All right, this will be add trip page 3. And the subheader here will be add things to do in like that. That's the same. These are just going to change to trip dot thing to do 1, things to do 2, and things to do 3. And really in here, we don't even need labels. All right, so I can get rid of that. Come in here and put in that, and that'll be 2. And I'm going to add one more of these. And that'll be 3. And then finally for our buttons, this one now says save. And the other one still says cancel. All right. Now, again, is it possible there are some mistakes in here? Of course there are. We put in a lot of code. All right. One thing I really want you to do, you meaning everybody again who's watching this, please, at the end of the semester, and I'm teaching this the way Evan taught it. We talked about this. We do talk weekly. All right. He's pretty much is doing it when he taught it last, did it the same way I'm doing it. But let me know if you think, no, we need more homework, or yes, I do like the way he's going over these and then explaining. Let us know that. I get evaluated. I never see your evaluations. I get a summary. Now, occasionally somebody will write something down. I hated this about him, I hated that. They'll usually take those out. Sometimes I see them anyway. And I may have even told you this at the school I used to work at. This was actually a couple schools ago. Somebody wrote down on the eval, I hate his voice. And again, I mean, there's not real much I can do about that. So, but I try to take all the criticism as being constructive criticism is what I'm telling you. All right, so let me do a file save all here and let's run it and see now when we click the add button if we're able to put stuff in here. All right, now when we add a trip, all right, you can see everything that's in here. That's a good start. So the destination, I was playing with this before. So I'm going to put in here the moon. Don't ask me why. Accommodation, Moon Hotel, start date. Well, you'll notice that it really is right here. This is in here as a date picker. That's kind of nice. All right, so I'll put in today. All right, and for the end date, I'll put in a week from today. I don't know. That's fine. So I've got the moon hotel today, and then the end date as well. Next, all right, phone number. Again, I've thrown some just junk in here, and the email. It doesn't really matter. You put in almost whatever you want. And things to do on the moon. You'll notice I should have went back and shown. All right, looks like everything worked. So I have a destination, and notice trip to the moon. So that was my message. So that was put in there as well. All right. So our destination was okay. Our start and end dates were okay. Our accommodation worked. All right. That's all that I put in there. In fact, I thought did I put in a phone number too? I don't remember. And things to do. So let's add one more. All right. And I'm going to put it in here as Nashville. Again, add trip, destination, and dates. So I'm going to put in Nashville. I'm going to put in a date. Just move in, put in something else here. So let's move to November, and we'll say November 1st. That's fine. And we will end it on November 13th. I don't care. All right. And that's fine. But I'm not going to put in an accommodation now. And I'm going to click next. All right. You'll notice it still says it went right to add things to do in Nashville. It was the program was smart enough that since I did not put in any accommodations, all right, it just skipped that page. All right. And I don't want to do anything while I'm there. So I'm going to click save. And now I've got just that. All right. Let's add another one. And I'm just going to put in something here. I'll just put in St. Louis. All right. And we will put in an accommodation here. So I'll just put in St. Louis Hilton. I don't even know if there is one. And again, we're just putting some stuff in here. I think we can go backwards. All right. So I'm going to put in here like August 8th, which I mean, this is something that you'd want to actually check, because can I book something that's already passed? All right. But that's okay. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. All right. So I've got all of that stuff in there now. And when I click next, it should show me the destination stuff. But again, I can put in one of these and not put in the other one. Let's leave the phone number out and let's put in here St. Louis Hilton at hotels.com, something like that. All right. And things to do, we'll say see the arch. All right. And when we look here, we've got that, we've got this, and we've got that. All right. So it does look as though it's working. And again, we've got this in here, the trip to St. Louis added. Now, I said this to you before, we are in just a minute. We're going to start up on chapter 9. As I read the book, there's going to be very little to nothing that I'm going to be able to test you on for chapter 9, just so you know. And even for chapter 8, right now, if you remember from the last version of the test that we put in, when you click the add to cart button, basically it just comes up with a message on the screen that said that the item was added to the cart. I might have you change that to some temp data like what we have here, just so you can incorporate that. All right. But as far as I can tell, at least, everything is in here. Now, one last thing I wanted to do is I'm going to stop the run here. All right. And I'm going to start running it again. And my information should be in there. And it is. That's good. Also, if I stop the run and I go into my database, so let me view SQL Server Object Explorer. All right. And we'll look in here under trips. And if we look at our data, it's in there as well. All right. So you can see it. I don't think I can even make that any bigger, but we've got our destination in there, our accommodation. All right. Things to do. I only put in one, but hopefully you get the idea that the rest of them should be filled in as well. All right. Now, did yours work, Grant, when you ran it?
For the most part, I had a bug come up where I was getting stuck on the accommodations phone and email page. So if I got to that page too and I clicked next, it would just keep loading that same page. So I was trying
Okay.
to figure that out now.
All right. Well, why don't we go back quickly and then take a look. I don't know if that's going to be in your pages or not, but it could be. So let's go back and look at, it was when you were going from page 1 to 2 or 2 to
2 to
3?
3.
2 to 3. So let's look at page 2 here. And if we still have a problem, we'll go back and we'll look at the, we'll take a look at your controller. So probably it would be in the controller, but.
That's where I was looking.
All right, that looks okay though. Let's take a
Yeah,
look in
that's
the controller then. All right. And there was your page 2 stuff. Let me move this over. And this over. I would think it would probably be in the ad but it could be it probably would be in the ad post. But
okay.
why don't you check this?
This looks right to me.
And let's move down to here. And if it does look like everything was put in okay, feel free to take this, put it in your read, and just send me an email and say, hey, this is the problem, and I'll be more than happy to look at it at the end of class today.
Okay, I just found that I had another model state is valid if block that you don't have there, so I just deleted that and I'm gonna check.
Okay. I mean, I've got this one.
Yeah, I have
If
that
that
one on
sounds
page 1, but I had one on page 2, and I'm wondering if that was
no.
maybe looping it. That was it. That fixed it. Thank you.
Good. So yours is working. All right. And that goes for everybody else. I think you already know that. But if you have a problem with something, if you think, hey, I thought I typed it incorrectly and I watched the video, etc., and something isn't working, let me know and send me, put it out there as a repo, but send me an email with a fairly detailed message in it. What some of you have been doing in the past is you'll do a screenshot, which is helpful, but then you won't send me your code. And if I get a screenshot, that's just part of the problem. At least possibly that's part of the problem. Maybe that's not even the problem. All right. Okay, so let me do a file, save all here and close this. And we're going to jump right into chapter 9 then. All right. Now, chapter 9, as you can see, is entitled How to Work with Session State and Cookies. The thing that we were working with before, all right, when we worked with temporary data, the idea behind temporary data is in the very word itself. All right, and that is it's temporary. Okay, here we're talking about things that we want to persist. All right, session state, right now, as an example, let's say that I go to my doctor's office tomorrow and I get a physical. All right. So my state would be my current height, my current weight, and all of my specifics. If it's now a year from now and I go back to the doctor, my state may have changed. I mean, I'm not going to get any taller, but I may have put on some weight, I may have lost some weight, etc. So when we talk about state, that's pretty much what we're talking about is the value of different variables. Cookies, now, on the other hand, cookies are basically text files that get sent from the server, and they get sent from the server to the client. All right. And they can be all sorts of things. You may have gone out and agreed to do certain stuff when you go out to websites where maybe they ask you to, you can customize the background color or the font or the foreground color or something else. All right. And those are usually cookies. Now, there's all sorts of articles, there's all sorts of things I have read online that say cookies are evil. They're not. They're text files. Many people are under the misguided notion that they are executable. Cookies are not executable. All right. Over time, browsers have changed. And what I mean is today, some browsers, I don't even know if they have a limit on the number of cookies you can have. But with most browsers, years past, it was like you could only have about 20 cookies in your system at a time. And literally the way it would work then is if you added another one, it would find the oldest one and it would remove it. You can also set your own cookies, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. All right. And when you do that, there's certain things that you must put in, and there's certain things that you can put in. All right. And we will talk about persistent cookies as opposed to non-persistent cookies. With a persistent cookie, the cookie value, the cookie will remain basically on the computer even after the session is shut down. With typically like with a regular session cookie, as soon as the session stops, all right, the cookie goes away. And important because one of those cookie values, technically, when you start up a session, typically is what's called a session ID. So if I'm going out to, um, let's say I'm going out to, I don't know, to Amazon, and I put some stuff in a cart, but I don't buy it. All right. I don't buy it yet. I leave it in there. There's a good chance if I come back tomorrow or next week or even next year, that stuff will still be in there. So that is persisting. All right. And I remember doing that years ago with a different company where I went to purchase something and then I changed my mind and I came back much later and it was still in there. All right. Now, sometimes too, with these session cookies, what'll happen too is if there's inactivity, let's say for a half an hour, the cookie might go away as well. But the reason I'm telling you that and the reason that it's important is you may have heard of the term like session hijacking. And when that happens, typically what that is somebody has gained access to your session ID. All right. Not that's not the cookie, it's the value. And in essence, they're you. They are you, which means that they can go in and make purchases, etc., and send them to a different address. And, it looks like you're the one doing the purchasing. All right. And that's pretty interesting. I mean, I've gone through myself. I'm getting this bogus charge from Microsoft every month. This has been happening now for like 4 months. The first month it happened and I didn't even realize it. And I paid it. The second time my wife said, "What is this for, if I can ask you?" And I said, "I don't have a flaming clue." So believe me, I called Microsoft. I had a woman on the line. She said, "I'm going to look into it for you." I've sent them 15 or 20 different emails on it. I'm not exaggerating. They've never gotten back after that, but I keep getting charged. So what ended up happening is I had to change twice. I had to change my MasterCard. All right. And now they have no idea what my new number is. And God knows I will not tell them. All right. But all I'm telling you is that's the kind of thing that can happen. And there have been stories about this where, somehow somebody has gotten a hold of somebody's session ID and they become them, for lack of better words. All right. So when we look in here, notice we're going to have two more versions of our NFL Teams app. All right. And some of the stuff we did or tried to do yesterday, as far as setting up a favorite team and the like. Remember, we didn't even have that on the example we had yesterday, even though they showed it in the book. But with the one they showed in the book, it basically put it out to temp data. And it gave a message that said something like Seattle is your favorite team or the Seahawks or whatever it was. But since it was just putting it in temp data, I could keep selecting the same team. We don't want to do that anymore. All right. So we are going to make some changes and we're going to work on that with session values. All right. And if you look in here, the first part of the chapter is on sessions. And again, they'll talk about ways to maintain state. All right. And they'll talk about session state and session values. Then we'll look at example 3. Then we get into cookies at the end for the last 10 or so pages, and we talk about cookies, and we get another perspective. What I'm going to do try to do between today and tomorrow are 2 different things once we end class today. First of all, I want to go and try to get all caught up on my grading. All right. And my morning class is taking a test, a 2-day test that they were taking today and tomorrow. All right. So I should have time that I can grade everything. Then tomorrow I will write the test. I will get the test to you before class starts tomorrow. And as I've done in the past, at 12:05, I will go over the test with you. All right. Okay. Let's just leave it at that and get started. All right. Now, as they say in here, this is a key thing to realize, all right, that HTTP, the hypertext transfer protocol, is basically stupid. As it says there, it doesn't keep track of an app state between round trips. What that means is if you go out to the server and do something, okay, and then you go out an hour later and you do something, the the system itself doesn't know that you're the same person doing 2 different things or 2 different people doing 2 different things, and it doesn't care. All right. So as it says, once a browser makes a request and receives a response, all right, the app terminates and the state is lost. Well, that might not be what you want to do. Case in point. All right. I remember when one of my daughters was going to school, and of course, dad had to buy their books for them. And so as soon as they'd announced the book list, I didn't want to go into their bookstore and buy stuff because they never had used stuff in there. So as soon as we got the book list, I would go out and uh, Amazon and try to buy used copies or Book Brain or one of these other sites. All right. But sometimes they wouldn't announce them all on the same day. Sometimes they'd announce several throughout the day. So it was that kind of thing. All right. So it says here that there's a couple tables on the next page. And it says the first table rather, talks about 4 ways that you can maintain state. One of them we've been dealing with all semester. As I should say, since we've gotten into databases, we've been working with hidden fields. And typically, not in this last program where we passed the page number, but typically we've been passing in our ID, which is our primary key. We've also, in the past, we have worked with query strings. Remember that with a query string, that what's up here in your address bar, if you do a get, everything that's after that question mark, all that stuff that gets added that's a query string. All right. And now we're going to bring into the equation session state and cookies. All right. And it says the second table presents 2 features for maintaining. All right. State that is specific to ASP.NET Core, routes, and temp data. And again, we've talked about both of those. You've gone in and you've seen a couple of ways that you can reroute. All right. By either using the core route attributes, all right, where we do our decorating, or by going into the actual program.cs file and adding a route in there. All right. And that's what they're saying in here. We've already talked about some of this stuff. All right. So this is the book's definition, maybe better than mine. I don't know. But I guess I probably didn't mention that. Cookies are another one of these key value pairs. So we've done some work now in the last few chapters where we've talked about key value. All right. And there are a lot of things that you can set for a cookie. All right. At a minimum, though, you have to typically give the cookie a name, which would be its key, and some kind of a value. But there's all sorts of things that you can put in there. For example, you can put in what's called an expiry date, which is when you want that cookie to expire. And you can put in really weird dates. I mean, I could put in here, if I wanted to, 10/4 in the year 3000. I won't be around to see if the cookie actually expires then or not, but you can do that. The other thing that you can do is, if you've got an existing cookie and you want to get rid of it, you can change the expiry date on it to a date in the past. So there's different things that you can do in here. All right, so as it says there, the cookie is a key value pair created on the server, passed to the browser. The browser passes the cookie back to the server with each HTTP request. All right. Session state, as mentioned right here, as the author says, the data for a user session is stored again in key value pairs. The data persists across all requests that the user makes until the app removes the data or the session ends. All right, a session can end in one of two ways. You close your browser, or again, that period of inactivity, as I mentioned before. All right. Now, as it says here, to make it possible for a session state to work, the server creates this session ID. Okay. Usually, this is one of those user IDs where it's about 40 characters, and it's a combination of letters and numbers. I don't think it has special characters in it. And one of the reasons that's done is they want to make it as hard for somebody to be able to crack it as possible. All right. And as it says, it sends this particular session ID to the browser in a cookie. So that's where people get the idea that cookies are evil. Yes, they can contain potentially sensitive information, but the cookie itself is just a text file. All right. So they show you this. And I don't think, we've already talked about hidden fields in the past. We've talked about query strings in the past, and we just talked about cookies and session state. So hopefully you have at least a fundamental idea of everything that you see right here. All right. And again, my definitions, of course, aren't going to be exactly the same as Murex. All right. The two ASP.NET Core MVC features for maintaining state. And again, that's what chapter 6 was all about. We talked about routing. All right. We just finished chapter 8 where we talked about temp data. All right. This is actually a really good graphic that's right here. All right. And they're basically showing HTTP requests and HTTP responses and exactly what is going on. All right. You'll notice, as it says with the first request, the web app creates a session and assigns it an ID. All right. The reason, again, that that's important is now the system can do, for lack of better words, kind of a correlation or a relationship, and says, oh, that's the same person coming in here and doing something else. All right. So again, when we talk about state, as they mentioned right there, for lack of better words, it's the current value of the variables, that are being used in the program. As mentioned, by default, HTTP is stateless. All right. And ASP.NET Core MVC provides several ways to maintain state, like cookies and sessions. And of course, they're not unique. All right. If we went out and used PHP, for example, we'd be doing a lot of the same type of thing. All right. Now, in here, just so you know, it gets pretty thick, for lack of better words. They start talking about a lot of the different functions that get called, etc. All right. Now, what I am going to do is, when they come up and they get to, in a little bit, when they get to version 3 of our NFL app, I'll bring it up. And then towards the end of the chapter, when they talk about version 4, I'll bring that up. But I mean, to me, this is good stuff. It really is. But if I'm taking a written test, I know that I can go back and look on this page. But as it says, first session state needs to be added to the services for the app. To do that, this code calls add memory cache and add session, etc. And it goes through all this stuff. And it says what has to be done. All right. I could test you on this stuff. Maybe I should test you on this stuff. I don't know. But I read through it again last night and I just thought it, after a while, for lack of better words, it kind of makes you dizzy. All right. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on in here. And when we take a look here, so this is what they're saying. Now notice this is new stuff and it has to come before this. So what we've always done in the past is we've added our stuff after this, but now this has to come before. All right, the add memory cache and the add session. And then later we have to tell it we want to be able to use the session. All right. And as it says in here, how to change your default session state, etc. in there. As they mentioned down on the bottom here, by default, session state is disabled. So to enable it, that's when you add that code that we just looked at. And again, you can come in and you can change the default settings. So as you can see in here, the default is 20 minutes. If you didn't like that, you could make it something else. All right. Here are some different options they're talking about that you can set for cookies. All right. And there are more than what's being shown right here. All right. So as they say here, the iSession interface provides methods that allow you to set, get, and remove items from session state. All right. They give you an example right there, and they say there's two set methods that allow you to store an integer or a string. There's two get methods that allow you to get those from session state. All right. So when you think about it, think about the bike thing that we've been working on. All right. And what would you put in session state? Well, probably the name of whatever it is you wanted to purchase and the price. At a minimum, you probably need that stuff. All right. Again, these are going to be stored as key values. All right. And they mentioned in here, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here. In a little bit, I believe someplace in this chapter, we're going to talk again about serialization and deserialization. And I talked a little bit about that the other day, but we're going to talk about it some more in just a few minutes. All right. So they start to show you here, and you'll notice as it says, set methods start with set, get methods start with get. I believe we've gone through this before, but anything with set, you can kind of look at it as though it's something on the left-hand side of an equal sign. You're changing the value of something. Anytime you use get, it's more or less like it's on the right-hand side of an equal sign. You're grabbing the value and you're setting something else to that value, but you're not changing it. All right. So again, they come in here and they talk about what you can do for session state. All right. Now, some of this stuff you're going to see again, okay? And we'll talk about it in other chapters. I don't at all mean to minimize this. And one of the reasons that you are asked to do the written tests and you are asked to do the sports pro thing is it does give you a little bit of a chance to do some of this. All right. But like I said, to me, I just thought it's going to be a cluster if I try to put this on a regular test, on a written test. All right. Some people are going to get it because they're just going to keep looking and trying different things that are in the book. And other people are going to have nothing but problems with it. All right. And I told Evan that too. And I don't believe, I could be wrong, I don't believe he did anything as far as testing sessions. I'll go back and look at the master tests that are out there, but I believe I'm correct. All right. So as it says there, again, there's JSON, JavaScript, object notation. One of the things that's nice about JSON, if you don't know this already, is JSON is a way that you can store things. There's more to it than that. But one of the advantages of JSON is it's supported by basically every major programming language there is. All right. And it's been around for quite a while. And sometimes when you are using things that work with JSON, you've got your choice. You can save and work with stuff in JSON, or you can work with it in XML. Most people will tell you that JSON is easier to work with. Also, correct me, please. You don't have to even answer if I grant, but you guys should have worked with JSON last semester in the ASP 1111 class. All right. So like I said, that's just two different languages that utilize it. All right. When you work with JSON, you can serialize things and you can deserialize them. When you serialize it, typically what it is you've got an object, and whatever it is you're trying to work with can't work with an object. It's like it's a blob. So when you serialize, it accepts the object and it basically converts it into a big string. And then when you deserialize it, it goes the other way around. It takes that string and it converts it back into an object. And the reason that that's important, all right, is sometimes when you do certain work, you can't, it won't, you want to call certain methods, they won't work on an object, but if you pass a string to them, it'll be fine, and vice versa. So they give an example in here. It says the first code example shows how to store a team object in session state as a JSON string. So when you look at it, it doesn't look too bad. All right. You can see that you've got an ID, you've got a name, you've got a conference, and you've got a division, and you've got a logo. And out of those, the ID has been set and the name has been set and nothing else. All right. And then they show you in here how you can go back and forth between the two. And yes, I have done work. It's been in JavaScript, all right, where I serialize and deserialize. Okay. So you can read this yourselves. I'll leave that up there for a second. But again, hopefully at least what's going on in here, at least at a high level, makes some sense. All right. Now, how to encapsulate session values. When you think of encapsulation, the idea is you want to be able to do something and give the user a way to work with it, but hide the actual implementation of it. So the key to encapsulation, and I've used this example before, I'm not going to even bring it up, but I brought up the Windows calculator before. And I said, when you bring up the calculator and you put in a number, okay, and then you hit the square root key or whatever the key is, something happens. All right. Your interface is what you can see and you know how to use. The implementation for how that's done is hidden from you. All right. And what they're saying here is when you're working with this stuff, at least some of the stuff you work with will be encapsulated or hidden from you. All right. To me, this is as heavy as anything that we've gone over for this entire semester when you're talking about serializing and deserializing. All right. I've got a meeting tomorrow with Doug and with Evan, and I'm going to double check. I'm going to ask Evan if he's ever, when he does his test, uh, did he ever test and put anything in there with sessions? If he says he did, I'm going to ask him to show me a copy of the test. All right. So we'll see what he says. And my meeting with him tomorrow is at 7:30. It's 7:45. We meet every Thursday. All right. Now they talk here about a wrapper class. And again, the wrapper class in its own way deals with this idea of encapsulation, because what the wrapper class rather does is it's called a wrapper because it's like it wraps up the logic. So things can happen behind the scenes that you don't have to worry about. In fact, if you've heard the term before, and I know you have, Grant, and probably most of you have in the AWD1115 class, you've heard of the term API, an application program interface. And with an API, basically what you have with an API is it's a contract. All right, where some software says, I'm going to provide this service for you, but in order for you to utilize this service, you'll have to utilize it in the way I tell you to. All right, that's kind of what APIs are all about. And if you were to write your own API, which of course you could do, it'd be the same thing. So if you allowed people to do something, I don't know what, but if you allowed them to do something, all right, and if they used your API, they could do that thing. But for instance, if you told them they have to pass in 3 parameters, whatever they are, all right? So the implementation is how something happens. The interface is what you choose to show the end user. The wrapper is kind of an intermediary where you actually take the implementation code and you wrap it up. So people, because really there's no reason for them to see it. And when you think about it, all right, when you think about it, we, you know, 2 things. First of all, we've been doing this all semester. You've called routines. If I went back to the program we just did, I'm sure routines that we called in there, some of which we wrote, but some of which are just there. And when you do certain things, when you call, for example, a bootstrap class, all right, just something simple, text center, all right, that centers text. Okay, so if I want to center text utilizing Bootstrap, I need text dash center. Or in my CSS, I need align text center. Do I physically know how the text is centered internally? No, I have no idea. And not to be funny, I don't care. I just care that when somebody gives me the ability to do something, tells me how to do it, that if I do it in the way they've told me to do it, that I get the result that they've promised. All right. Simple enough, I guess. So as it says here, to make it easier to work with session state in your app, you can create your own wrapper class. So again, you would take this logic and, for lack of better words, kind of hide it. All right. Because again, when you are writing something, there's really no reason that you should have to be sharing it with other people. All right. Now, at the end of the previous chapter, not this chapter, but at the end of chapter 8, there was another example there that had that guitar shop. I have not gone through it. I'm going to try to when I can. All right. The reason I'm telling you that, though, is at the end of this chapter, at the end of chapter 9, the example that's at the end of the chapter works again with the NFL Teams app. All right. So now if we go in there, I'm going to bring this up and we're going to take a look at this. It is 2:09. So I'll go till, I think we came back from our break at 1:20. So I'll go till 2:20 and then we'll take another break. All right. But if I bring that up, let's see, I know I've got it in my junk here someplace. But of course I don't see it. So I'll just go grab it. That's the grading that I'm doing. So let's go in here and do it from here. Something. Let me try that again. We're on. Here we go. All right. And if I go, I'm going to go out to student download, book apps, and this will be chapter 9A, NFL teams. So this should be the one that they're talking about in the book right now. All right. Now, the reason I'm showing you this, the reason I'm bringing it up, and I'm going to run it right now. I don't know if it's going to use, hopefully it'll use the same database. I don't know what the name of my database is in here. I don't remember anymore. But let's see if I've got an NFL teams database in here. I've got an NFL teams and the NFL teams 2. I should be okay. All right. All right, looks like it's coming up. All right. Looks familiar, but let's talk about what's new. All right. Notice we've got this, my favorite teams, and it says 0 right now. So if I come in and I go to Green Bay here, now notice I have an add to favorites. And as soon as I click that, that goes to a 1. All right, if let's assume for a second, I also like the Buffalo Bills. And now, as you can see, it goes to a 2. Is that big a thing? Not really. But if I stop my run here, all right, and I bring it up again, notice it's back to 0. It was using session state. And when I closed the browser, the session ended. All right. But while it's open here, I can go and basically bring in as many teams as I want and make them my favorites. This all works the same. So now it cuts it down to the 16 AFC teams, and here to the 16 NFC teams. And here it comes down to the 4 based on the division. All right. So I'll stop that run and we'll take a quick look at what they say about this. All right, like I said, I'll go for about five more minutes and we'll take another break. So the next topics present a version of the NFL Teams app that keeps track of the user's favorite teams in session state. If you didn't realize that already, they're using a Bootstrap badge, and that's what has the number on it. All right. So as it says here, the first screen looks pretty much what we saw before, except there's that add to favorites. Okay. And it's funny that they picked the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to tell you I'll make it real short. All right. Years ago, Muroc was going to update their C++ book, not C sharp, but C++. And I was one of the people that they had chosen on their short list to be a possible author for the book. And I had to go through a phone interview with Mike Muroc, who is basically runs Muroc Publishing. And I think he told me he was originally from Milwaukee. And I think that's what has a lot to do with this. As it turned out, what they ended up doing was they let go of virtually every author they had, other than 2 or 3. It was like something like 3, maybe 3 or 4 authors. And everybody let go, and they decided they were going to do everything with these authors that they had. So I wasn't chosen, even though I wrote a chapter for them. All right, I wasn't chosen. All right. It says there back in chapter 8, even though that didn't work for us, we had that temp data. If you remember, that was the idea, that you'd get a message on the screen, but it wasn't really saving anything. All right, so as it says here, there's 2 new things about the homepage here. We've already talked about them. First, the homepage displays my favorite teams link. Second, if the user turns to the homepage, after displaying the team or favorite page, the home page displays the same conference and division that were selected the last time this page was displayed. All right. So what does that mean? That means if we come here, just kind of do what they're just mentioning. So I'm going to run this again. All right, and I'm going to go and let's just go there by here. All right, and by here. All right, and if we choose this, okay, well, we are at a different page right now. This is a page just about the Packers. But if I click add to favorites, notice I go back to where I was. That's what the other thing that they're showing you there. So not only did it add it here to this bootstrap badge, it redirected me back to where I was before I chose them as a favorite. All right. So that's kind of what I just told you, in other words. So this version, as it says, stores the conference and division the user has selected, as well as any teams the user has added to their favorites. All of that then is stored in session state. All right. So the next thing in here, as mentioned, are the session classes. And as it says here, they've added 2 classes added to the model layer, all right, for this version. We've got a sessions extension class to use with JSON, all right. Then, as it says, this class defines 2 generic extension methods. Let's take a look. All right. Now, this may make very little sense to you, or it may make some sense to you. In here, as it says, they are allowing you, all right, they are allowing you to set a value. And since there's a lot of information there, there is what? There is the name of the conference, there is the name of the division, there is the name of the team, all right, etc. And they're probably also storing that ID. So that's 4 pieces of information. So they are calling the serialized method to convert that into a big string. So that's what's happening in there. And in going the other way. All right. So what they're saying is if it's not null or empty, don't do anything. Otherwise, basically, you're going to deserialize, which is again taking that big string and breaking it up into its individual components. All right. So in this class, you can see what's in here. All right. And like I said, that may not make a whole heck of a lot of sense to you, but here, set teams. All right, that's going to allow us basically to choose favorites type of an idea. Get teams will allow us to get those back. All right, some of the rest of this is very similar to what we've done before. The difference is we're storing it as session data, whereas before, if you remember, we had temp data all over the place. And now we're doing it as session data. All right. All right. Okay, it says that figure 9.9 presents the team's view model, which has been updated to include a property of type team. All right. So if we go back and look at what was in there before, if you remember, we had the thing in there for the conference and the thing in there for the division. But now we're being even more specific by adding the team information. As it says, this allows the details action of the home controller to return a view model that returns a team object as well as the current IDs for everything. Right? That's what's changed. Then they've got the home controller. All right. And as it says, it uses session state to store and retrieve the active conference and the division IDs. All right. We are going to look at some of this stuff. And I don't mean it all. I just want people to know when I say this, I don't mean it all to mean anyone's intelligence. I just think this is too much to expect people, I think that it's not too much to expect people to have a fundamental understanding of what's going on. But I think to expect that people, after lecturing on this for an hour or two and showing you some examples and going over what's in there, then expecting you to be able to replicate that using JSON serialized and deserialized methods rather, I think that's too much. Again, you may agree with me and you may disagree with me, but I will ask Evan tomorrow, as I mentioned, if he did anything with these. All right. All right. It says we got the layout in here, but again, the big difference with the layout is in here. All right, we have to come in and talk about how many favorite teams we have. Okay, so you got the count, etc. All right. There's a home details view, as it says in here. The model, it says detail is the team's model object rather than the team's object. The rest of it is the same as chapter 8 with one difference. Now the Razor code that builds return to the home page can use the active conference and the active div. Again, it's so that once you choose a favorite team, you go back to the page you were at, all right, when you chose that. So if I knew I wanted to choose a bunch of teams from the AFC South and I chose one of them, made it a favorite, as soon as I got done, I'd go right back to the AFC South again. And that's pretty much what they're saying in here. All right. All right. It is 2:21. Let's stop right now. We'll just come back at 2:30. All right. So 8 or 9 minutes. We'll finish this up. There's not too much left in this chapter. And then we'll talk about what we're going to do for the test and what your homework is going to be for this. So I'll see you at 2:30. All right, so it is 2:30, and as you'll notice, if you look on here, it says there's now a new controller. There's a favorites controller. All right, as it says, it has an index action that handles get requests and add and delete actions that handle post events. All right, now I don't remember if this is true or not, but let's see. If we look at it at what's in, again, we're working with sessions, so that should allow us to add a new team. All right, and that it posted. All right, I don't think we have full threat capability in here. I think we're just able to add. I don't think we're able to actually remove players from here or anything. Not that that's a big thing one way or the other. All right. All right. The last part of the chapter, then the last 8 to 10 pages talks about cookies. I'm not going to repeat what I said before. The only thing I'd add is if you look at that second paragraph that's right in here, all right, that what the author says here, a session cookie is stored in browser memory and exists for the duration of the browser session. So again, that's usually it means until either you have shut the browser down or there has been inactivity for more than a half an hour. On the other hand, as it says, a persistent cookie is stored on the system and it's retained until the cookie's expiration date or until the user clears it out. So the idea with a persistent cookie is just as it says in the name, the value persists. All right. Okay. So they mention here, it says the first table shows some of the properties. Well, these shouldn't be surprises to you. All right. Request and response. The request, as it says, the HTTP request sent from the browser to the server, and the response is sent from the server to the browser. All right. Now, there's certain things, when you work with cookies, I'm not going to get into them. I'm not at all expert on these types of things, but there's all sorts of potential problems that if you have a cookie that you have created and it goes and it tries to call something that's in another domain, it may or may not work, right? Typically, it won't work, all right? But as far as the properties for the cookie, here they are. As it says, the domain is the domain to associate the cookie with. The expires is also known as the expiry date. And as it says right there, it's when you want the cookie to expire. Since the default is null, it just means that it'll persist. All right. All right. The path, notice the default is the root directory. And there's just a couple more in there. I don't think I've ever worked with max age or same site or the secure I've looked at already, as it says, whether the cookie can be transmitted over HTTPS only. All right, you'll notice that the default is false. Okay, so the key takeaways are to realize and understand the difference between using a session cookie, all right, which will expire, and a persistent cookie, which will not. So I know that in here, I was going to say they're going to show us the last edition version, whatever you want to call it, for now at least, of the NFL Teams app. All right. Now, as it says, it's been updated to store the IDs of the user's favorite teams in a persistent cookie. So what should happen now, as opposed to what I had shown you earlier. So again, where are we? Let's bring up the other one now, which I think is like 9B. So if we come in and we run this, right? It's going to look the same. But if I come in now and let's just grab 3 teams. All right. So I'll add the Packers. I'll add, oh, I don't know, the Patriots, and I'll add the Cardinals. All right. You can see I'm up to 3 right now. And now I'm going to stop. So I stop the run and I'm going to start the run up again. And you'll notice it's still at 3. All right. So it persisted, in other words. It was a persistent cookie so that it was set up so that even between sessions, okay. Now, I mean, if I kept adding and kept adding and kept adding, I suppose sooner or later. Now, if I go over to here and I click on this and I click add to favorites, notice it goes up to 4. So it is persisting, but yet it's not doing a very good job of going in there and checking and saying, you've already got that. In fact, if I do it again and add it, it's now 5. So it has nothing to do with the fact that I did 1 in one session and 1 in the other. All right. It has to do with the fact that there's really no check mechanism in here right now that is checking to see, hey, have I already grabbed this as one of my favorite teams? All right. Because if we did that, we could come back and there would be a time to use some temp data. And we could say you've already listed the Packers as one of your favorites, for example, and they're not doing that here. All right. So as it says, figure 915 shows the cookies class, which again encapsulates the code that the NFL Teams app uses to work with cookies. So if we take a quick look at it, some of it will probably make some sense to you. Some of it won't, because it's calling some of the internal cookie collection methods in order to do its thing. All right. So as it says, this app stores the IDs in a persistent cookie. The cookies class has an overloaded constructor that accepts the cookies collection from the request object or from the response object. So coming or going, however you want to look at it. All right. The updated index method, as it says, creates a new NFL session object, stores the IDs of the active conference and the division in the session state. If there's no team count in the session state, the code creates a new cookie object and passes it. So it's, for lack of better words, it's getting ready. So when you start adding teams, that you're able to do that. All right. Now, again, I'm not spending a lot of time on this. I realize that. If Evan comes back and tells me, I don't think he will, but if he does come back and say, oh, Jeff, I tested him on that and I went over this and then I'll do the same thing. All right. And I'll go and do it already tomorrow. I'm going to be amazed if he says that, but it's possible. All right. So as it says, we've now got add and delete methods. I didn't notice that delete, but it says that they've been added. All right. And that's it. So I just wanted to see one thing then. If I, whoops, it is up and running. So if I do run this one again, close the other one. All right. So if I do come in here and let's say Cardinals. All right. Well, there's an add to favorites, but I don't see in here any place where there is a delete. I could be missing something, but I don't think I am. All right. That's it. Now, I do want to mention something. I said this the other day, but I want to say it again to everybody, and that is this. If we go in here and we look, we just went over chapter 8. Actually, that's not a bad program, the trip log we just went over. And in a later chapter, it's either going to be 10 or 11, I believe. We're going to go back and revisit this trip log program. All right. But what they have you do for chapter 9 is this build a game of pig. All right. So the idea is this. You click new game. Every time you click roll, you're rolling a single die. All right. And the idea is to get to 20 or above. Okay. So let's say that I go and click roll and I get a 6. I click roll again and I get a 3. I click roll again and I get a 6, and I do it again and I get a 6. Probably wouldn't happen, but I'm now at 21. I can click hold and I win the game. On the other hand, if I click a 6 and then I get a 2, I've got an 8. And if I click again and I get a 1, when you get a 1, you lose all your points that you earned up to that point and you give up your turn. So it's designed to have 2 players. You can tell here that player, they have eclipsed 20 points. All right. So as it says, player 2 wins. Not a lot of specs. They're right here and here. What I'm planning on doing this weekend is either I'm going to do this program from scratch, or I'm going to go back and look at the recording I did of this a semester ago, and I'm going to see if it's still relevant right now. And if it is, I'll put that one out there. But either way, you will have something for it. I'm not going to require people do this. So for chapter 9, all right, well, let's say 8 and 9. Chapter 8, you're responsible then for doing the Build the Trips Log app, the one we just were working on. All right, that's your project thing for 8 and 9. Okay. And as far as the stuff in here for Sports Pro, you can see again, we're using temp data. Test product was added. So we're displaying messages. And in A2, as it says, use a view model with the incidents manager. They pretty much, in my opinion, walk you through this. All right. And then for 9.1, update incidents. All right. So that's what you have for homework. All right. The 8 and 9 homework will not be due until a week from Sunday. Now, since I talked so much today, all right, it's almost 3, and I talked yesterday for over 3 hours. What I'm going to do is, and I don't know where you stand on this, Grant, I'm not asking, but my guess is there's going to probably be one or more of you who by midnight tonight won't have turned in their test. I'm just making that guess. I could be right. I could be wrong. So this is what I'm going to do. All right. I am going to have my talk tomorrow morning with Evan. I am going to make tomorrow a straight lab day. So you can work on whatever it is you need to work on. Then on Friday, what I'm going to do is if I get the test written done, etc., and have a key with it by then, I will pass that out. You will have 2 class periods to work on it then, Friday and Monday, and it would be due next Wednesday. All right. Hopefully what I just said made at least some sense. You will be responsible for the written test for 8, the written test for 9. As far as your homework, I think that's the projects. That'll be 8.1. We're going to skip 9.1. And as far as Sports Pro, you will be responsible for 8.1, 8.2, and 9.1. All right. Okay. And if we can keep to that, then Friday would be a day for you to work on your test. Next Monday would be a day for you to work on your test. And then come Tuesday of next week, we'd go into chapter 10. I mentioned this to you before, but I want to say it again. And that is, we are going to go over after this 10, 11, and 12. Then you'll take your last test. That'll be your last hands-on test. That's at least the plan. All right. And I don't think that will change. Then we're going to spend quite a bit of time on chapter 13. If you are not aware of this, all right, if you are not aware of this, I'm going to go up to about, I don't know, 455. That's pretty close. All right. Once we get up to chapter, no, it isn't. Once we get up to chapter 13, all right, so at that point, and we're in chapter 13, that entire chapter will be, it's a website. Now, in this website, that they have you create in here. There, it's a bookstore website. It's very small in that it has very few books in it. I went back a year ago and rewrote it and added about 50 books and a bunch of different categories, etc., to expand upon it. So it looked more like a real life app. And if you notice in here, we will have admin user pages. So when we set that up, we will actually bring in the stuff that will allow us to add more of the stuff that we're starting to get into now. And what I mean is having the ability to go in there and do things in an administrative way. So the admin that we will add for the test in 1 through 9, all right, it's just going to basically have a link over here that says admin, and it will allow you with the 5 tables that we have to either update or add, update, or delete new products, new employees, new vendors, etc. But anybody can do it. When we get to this point, what you will learn about is how to have people log in, where, I mean, we'll still allow anybody to basically register as an administrator. All right. But then we'll look at it and we'll say, okay, you need special permissions to do the administrative functions. That's what we're moving toward. And once we get done with that, the way that the class is going to change, and I don't know when that'll be, if that's going to be in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it doesn't matter. Let's say it's 4 weeks from now that we're around this point. All right. I'm still going to go back here. I am still going to go through in your book. We will go through as a class, because that'll put us to right here. We will go through chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17. I'm not going through 18, but for 14, 15, 16, and 17, the plan will be this. I will lecture on each one of those chapters. I will go over the programs that are shown in the book. You will have to do the written tests, but you will not have to do any labs or any homework other than with the possible exception of chapter 16, authentication and authorization. All right, that's the plan at least. I want to run all that by Evan and make sure when he taught this class last, all right, which was last spring, and that's when I taught it last before now. I want to make sure that we're still in line with one another as far as what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, etc. Once we get to that point, we're going to start working on a project. I'm going to start you on it, and you're going to have your choice then. You can either do the project that I start you on, or you can go off on your own direction and do a project. All right. It'll be very similar, but as far as what we do it on, we basically want to build the equivalent of a store, of an electronic store. And we will have a shopping cart in it. It will keep track of how much you owe, etc. I don't think we'll have time to try to implement Stripe or something in here, or a PayPal sandbox. We might. And if nothing else, what I'll do is I'll try to at least demo something with that and show that to you. We'll see how that goes. But that's the plan. So I'm making tomorrow lab for the entire period. During that time, I am going to make sure you've got a test. It'll be hot number 4, I guess, and it'll be based mostly on 8 and 9, probably heavy on 8 with little to nothing on 9. All right. Provided that's what I talk about with Evan tomorrow, and we agree on that. All right. So then Friday and Monday would be lab days for you to work on the test. The test would be due Wednesday of next week. All right. So a week from today, which I think is the 11th. All right. And then we'll see where we are after that. All right. We'll do 10 then on like Tuesday and Wednesday, and then maybe Thursday we'll go through 11. All right. just so you have some kind of an idea where we are, where we're going to, etc. All right. So that's all I had for today. All right. And we will pick it up. I will talk to you tomorrow. As soon as I talk to Evan, I'll do my morning email that I send to you, and I'll let you know exactly what's going on tomorrow. All right. Until then, have a good rest of the day, and I'll talk to you then. Thanks.
Thank you, you too.